Well, America prides itself on being a capitalist nation, a system that gives everyone a shot at the American dream. But is that really what it is today? Some would argue it's no longer a government for the people, but a government for corporations. This after the controversial passage of Citizens United, which allows corporations to pump unlimited amounts of money to fund campaigns. So has America become the United States of corporate greed? Joining us now is Chris Hedges, columnist for Truthdig and author of this latest book, Death of the Liberal Class. Welcome, Chris. Good to have you on the show. So we have the primaries going on today in 3 states, but you argue that these days voting doesn't even matter. Why do you say that?
Because there's no way to vote against the interests of Goldman Sachs, especially, and you mentioned Citizens United, since 2010, the corporations can anonymously spend unlimited amounts of money against any candidate who dares to challenge corporate interests. And that has essentially kept elected politicians completely in line, because if they step over that line, they're finished. And that's why you saw the announcement today that even Barack Obama, who swore that he wouldn't do it, is now asking people to contribute to the Democratic super PAC so that he can compete. It's legalized bribery. And it's not that corporate money wasn't involved heavily in determining the outcome of elections before 2010, but this clearly was the death blow, because the fear that has gripped politicians now within state houses and within Washington is that if they run afoul of the Chamber of Commerce, which represents the fossil fuel industry and major banks, any major corporation, they're finished. And it's become an extremely effective form of control.
And I know that you are a very strong critic of Citizens United. That's the ruling that allows corporations to pump as much money as they want into political campaigns. How would you say that this law has impacted the election so far?
Well, it's made it utterly impossible to run for office unless you have super PACs behind you. We've seen this with, for instance, Newt Gingrich. The only reason he's still alive as a candidate is because he has this massive infusion of money. Super PACs in every single race determine who gets elected and who doesn't. And once they get to Washington, the payoff is that these corporate lobbyists write the legislation, and then elected officials who in essence have become corporate employees pass it. And this has been an acceleration of the kind of coup d'etat in slow motion, the corporate coup d'etat that has gripped America. And I don't see any way out, because there's no pull on the other side. Unions are broken, popular movements are broken. The rise of the Occupy movement was met with draconian forms of control, including the physical eradication of encampments. Any kind of murmur of opposition within the wider society is ruthlessly quashed. And certainly within the formal mechanisms of power, there is no redress. I've been saying for some time that the only mechanisms we have now for resistance are civil disobedience, but we've seen how the state has responded to peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience, and that's essentially by trying to erase it from the landscape.
And you say, as we discussed earlier, that voting these days, it doesn't count, and we saw this crackdown on the Occupy Wall Street movement. What then can citizens do these days to bring about change?
I think civil disobedience. I think that we have to get out in numbers in the streets because that is the only recourse that we have left. And the rise of the Occupy movement, the ability of the movement to resonate across the American landscape. And I think we should be clear that the Occupy movement represents the mainstream. If you look at the polling, everything Occupy was calling for was embraced by 60+% of the American public, whether that was the reining in of banks, something to staunch the foreclosure and mortgage crisis that's pushed over 10 million Americans out of their homes, this disastrous health care bill, which is going to force us to buy their defective product. We have 50 million Americans without health care. 1 million Americans a year are going to bankruptcy because they can't pay their medical bills. I mean, everything is breaking down. The citizen has no protection left. And that was something that was articulated quite eloquently by the Occupy movement, which is why the power structure, and I think maybe first and foremost the Democratic power structure, has been working so hard to get rid of it.
And so Occupy Wall Street, they are discussing this. We just saw in the story we just played how devastated the Bronx is, the nation's poorest district, right next door to Manhattan. This issue of income inequality is a growing problem in the U.S. Why aren't we hearing the GOP candidates addressing it?
Well, because it's political theater. You know, it's inanities and absurdities about right to life and self-deporting undocumented workers, and it's completely disconnected from the concerns of ordinary Americans, and that's why the Occupy movement had to be shut down, because the Occupy movement was a vehicle by which those concerns were being articulated.
And President Obama, he hasn't really come out and publicly supported the Occupy Wall Street movement. You do say that Obama is held hostage to the system. Can you explain?
Sure. I mean, Obama, understands how power works in this country. He knows that he must serve those centers of power if he is to remain in office, and he has done a very effective job of doing that. He's broken almost every campaign promise that he made in 2004, including the latest, decision to take money from a super PAC. He said he wouldn't do that. It has been a continuation in terms of both structure and policy from the Bush administration, whether that is preemptive war, whether that is refusing to hold Wall Street accountable for the crimes that they committed, or even the restoration of civil liberties. We talked about the National Defense Authorization Act, but let's remember that the Obama administration hasn't even found it within themselves to restore habeas corpus. So on sort of fringe issues of personal piety and morality,
Chris,
there are differences, but not on any major issues.
So much to talk about. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We'll have to continue this conversation another time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That was Chris Hedges, columnist and Truthdig, and author of the book Death of the Liberal Class.